Hi there, and welcome to my kitchen. Welcome to another episode of Baking with Bryan Live. I am Bryan, and I'm baking live in front of you. We have a really exciting show for you today. I'm actually going to be making two different items, and those are a flourless chocolate cake. These are two Passover-friendly items. I know we probably have some watchers from Hizikamuna congregation because I did a live stream over on their webpage, on their Facebook page, last week on Tuesday. So we probably have some watchers from there, which I'm thrilled to have. So we're going to be doing two Passover-friendly items today, but that are good for all year round. The first one is going to be a chocolate excess cake or a flourless chocolate cake. Pretty much, it speaks for itself. It's a rich flourless chocolate cake. And it's really simple. It's only got, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients, 6 ingredients maybe. And it's actually something that's gluten-free, so if you have a gluten-free member in your family, it's something that's really nice for them to be able to enjoy. And it's more of a baked custard than a cake. We'll get into that once I start making that. The second item that we're going to be doing is coconut macaroons, which are another classic Passover item, but are also really good all year round. So I see we have 7 viewers right now. I'm going to give a shout out to Rashida and to my Aunt Joanne who are watching. Really excited to have everybody with me today. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes to get a couple more viewers on, just to let some people get on. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the items that we're making. So the flourless chocolate cake, like I said, is more of a baked custard than a cake because there's no flour in it. So it's not going to have that cakey consistency. It's more along the lines of a cheesecake and a creme brulee, kind of, because the base of it is egg. So anytime you have an egg base item, it's more of a custard than it is a cake, a flourless egg item. So that we're going to be using a really dark unsweetened chocolate for that, and some semi-sweet chocolate, and it's just a really good rich cake. And the coconut macaroons, there's not really much to say about those. It's just a really good basic. Again, it's only got 4 ingredients, I think, in that. So these are two super simple items that you can make any time of year. All of the items will be kosher for Passover. Available in the store during Passover time if you choose to make it for that. Talking about the items that I'm using, the first thing I want to talk about is the chocolate. I use a really good quality chocolate. I actually get it from Aldi, believe it or not. This is the brand that they use. I don't know if we can get a close-up of this. So the name is Moser Roth, and it comes in different percentages. So 85% is almost unsweetened. It's got a little bit of sugar in it. The percentage means the amount of cocoa that is in the chocolate as opposed to other ingredients like sugar or milk or something else that would be in it. Obviously, milk chocolate is going to have milk in it. Pretty much all chocolate except for unsweetened has sugar. So this is 85%. That's a really, really dark chocolate. They make different percentages in this brand, and it's really good and it's really cheap. I think this was only like maybe $3 for this pack, and it's a 4-ounce pack. So this is really good. This is the chocolate that I use. And then for the macaroons, if you pulled up the recipe said to use unsweetened flake coconut or desiccated coconut. So what I found the best in the supermarkets, I found this at Giant. I believe it's their own Giant organic brand. It's an unsweetened flake coconut. Desiccated just means that it's a really fine grind, unsweetened, dried out coconut. It's really dry. And so this is the next best thing that I found. As you can see, it's not like the regular sweetened flake coconut. It's a lot drier and it's unsweetened, which lends a little bit of help to the recipe because you're adding sugar to it. So you don't want it to be too overtly sweet. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the specialty items that we're using in this recipe. So yeah, we're up to 16 viewers, now down to 14. So I'm going to get started. So the first recipe we're going to be working with is the chocolate excess cake, or the flourless chocolate cake. The first thing we want to do is want to get our pan prepped, because once we mix the batter with Passover cooking, a lot of the leavening is done with, most of the leavening is done with eggs because you can't use leavening agents for Passover. So this recipe we're going to be whipping up and foaming whole eggs, and those are going to give the lift to the cake. They're going to give the lift, and they're also going to be the support to hold that lift up. So we want to, when you mix the batter, you want to put it right in the pan and right in the oven so that it doesn't have time to fall and collapse. So we're going to get our pan ready first. We're going to grease the pan with a little bit of butter. If you wanted to do a non-dairy option for this recipe, just replace the butter with margarine, and the recipe should work exactly the same. So we're just painting the inside of the pan. Let me see if we can get that on our overhead cam. Just painting the inside of the pan. Edges go all the way up the side of the pan because the cake is going to rise. We're going to go all the way up in the corners and the nooks and crannies. You may be saying to yourself, hey Brian, why aren't you using your secret ingredient or your secret weapon when it comes to baking cakes? Which I'll remind everybody, my secret weapon is Pam for baking. Nothing will stick if you use Pam for baking. This is one of my favorite things to use when baking cakes. I use it all the time. It's great because it has the grease and the flour mixed into it. So you don't have to butter and flour your pan. It's all right here in this can. You just spray it in and nothing will stick. The reason I'm not using it is because we're doing a flourless cake, kosher for Passover. So that item contains flour. We don't want to use any flour, so we're not using that item. So we're going to butter the pan completely, and then we're going to cut out a parchment paper circle. So this, pretty much you just put the pan on top of the parchment paper, trace around, and then you cut a circle out. And then we're going to put that in the bottom of the pan. You're going to press it in to make sure that it really sticks to the bottom. You don't want any air bubbles underneath of it. You don't want any trapped air. We're just going to kind of use our finger and get it into the corner and smooth it all out so there's no air bubbles. You can't hardly even see it in the pan. And then we're going to use more butter because why not? And we're going to butter the paper as well. Just as an extra, it's not going to stick, but just as an extra insurance policy. And because butter is amazing and a wonderful ingredient, we're going to do that. So that's it. Our pan is ready to go. I'm just putting our butter back on the warmer to keep it warm. So we're going to set that to the side. First thing we're going to do, well, second thing, we've already done the first thing. We're going to put our water and our sugar in the pot to heat up. What we're doing here, so if you joined me last week, I measured all my ingredients out in front of you last week. Because I'm doing 2 recipes this week, I needed to move it along a little bit faster, so I pre-measured all of my ingredients out, so it'll help move things along a little bit faster. So what we're doing is essentially we're making a type of ganache with the chocolate and the butter and the sugar and a little bit of water. We're going to bring this to a boil just to dissolve the sugar. Put it over high heat. We're using a real heavy bottom pan here, and it's not going to take very long at all to bring it to a boil. And then we're going to add the chocolate and the butter into that. We're going to let it sit for a few minutes. It's going to melt. It's going to get beautiful and delicious. And then we're going to whisk it together to create an emulsion of the chocolate, the butter, and the water and the sugar. It's going to be nice and smooth. And then we're going to mix that into our eggs. With that, we're going to get our eggs started here in the mixer. I have a whisk on the mixer. Bowl is already locked in place. We're using a whisk because we're whisking up the eggs to get maximum volume. I know in the recipe I mentioned to use your eggs at room temperature. Room temperature eggs whip up a lot better. You get a lot more volume out of them than using cold eggs, believe it or not. And it's safe to keep your eggs out for a couple hours. These have been sitting out for about 2 hours to get warm to room temperature. If you forget to warm your eggs, you can put some warm water, not hot water, but put some warm water in a bowl, drop your egg in it for about 10-15 minutes, and it'll warm the egg up just enough to get it good. We're going to crack our 3 eggs into the bowl. I know it's impressive. With a lot of practice, you too can crack eggs with one hand. We're going to crack our 3 eggs. And I don't know if you noticed, if you can hear it. Hopefully you can. We have a little bit of background music. It's some elevator music going for you. That is care of our production crew. I have a question. I got an alert from my production crew that I have a question. Why don't you want to DR the sugar in the water? I noticed you sprinkled it in. Well, Amy, if I knew what DR meant, or what you were trying to ask, I could answer it a little bit better. I think you mean, why didn't you just drop the sugar in the water? No reason, really, in particular. I just sprinkled it on. You can just drop it in. It's not going to make any difference. You just want to make sure that when the water comes to a boil, you kind of give it a little stir to make sure that all of the sugar dissolves into it. So to the eggs, we're going to add our less amount of sugar. And then we're going to whip this up on high speed. It's going to get a little bit noisy, so I'm just going to explain what's going on before I turn the mixer on. The eggs and the egg whites and the sugar are going to whip up to maximum volume. That happens when it gets light and fluffy. You're going to see that the color is going to get a really pale yellow, and it's going to get to a thick ribbon stage, and I'll show you that when we get there. So I'm going to turn the mixer on. And they can still hear me. It's going to go for about 3 minutes, and that's going to get us to the maximum volume that we want. So while that's going, can they still hear me pretty well? Okay. Our water has come to a boil, so we're going to add in our chocolate. This is our unsweetened chocolate, our semi-sweet chocolate, and our butter is all going to go in at the same time. We're going to give it a little stir, and we're just going to let this sit so that it has a chance to melt, and then we're going to whisk it up, and it's going to be really nice and pretty. While that's working, I'm going to just clean up a little bit. We're almost there. You can see the eggs are starting to get a little bit bubbly and a little bit whipped up. You'll notice also we're going to be doing this with the mandel bread recipe we're going to be doing on Tuesday. Almost there, I promise. I'm just going to read through the comments real quick and see if we have any shout-outs I should give. We have 23 viewers. That's great. We have a question. I'm sorry?
What size baking pan are you using? And
so,
how many people will it serve?
Okay, so the recipe I sent out actually says to use an 8-inch cake pan. I switched it up. I made one last night, and the 8-inch pan, it came out really thin. It still came out good, but it's really super thin, so I switched to a 6-inch. I meant to say this at the beginning of the recipe. So I'm using a 6-inch round cake pan. I believe this is 2 inches tall. This will serve, this is a really, really rich cake, so you don't need to serve a lot of it. This will probably serve at least 8 people out of this 6-inch round. So our eggs are there. Our eggs are ready. We have another question? Oh my God, this is amazing. How do you know when the eggs are ready? Great question. So I'm getting ready to show you. You can see the color is light and fluffy. and they're a lot thicker. You can see when I pull the whisk out and it dribbles down. You can see it. See how you see the strand, and then it disappears. It kind of sits on the top for a minute, and then it disappears into the egg. That's pretty much what you want. You want it to be nice and thick like that. It could go for a couple more minutes. It's not that big of a deal. Sorry about the noise. But this is pretty good. So next what we're going to do, our butter and chocolate has melted really, really well. So we're going to whisk it all together. We're going to whisk it just until it's going to look like it comes together, and it's going to make this emulsion. So you don't see any separated butter, or you don't see any chunks of chocolate. It's just this really smooth, nice consistency. It's a nice ganache. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take a portion of our... Give me one sec. We're going to take a small portion of our eggs and temper them into the chocolate. The chocolate right now is pretty warm. If we were to dump it all into the eggs, two things are going to happen. There's a possibility that it's going to scramble the eggs because the hot going into the cold eggs could shock it and scramble the eggs. The other thing that's going to happen is you're going to lose some of the volume of the eggs that you just whipped up. When you add heat, it expands the air in the bubbles, and the bubbles pop, and you lose that fluff and that whip that you just created. So we're going to put about a third to a half of the eggs into the chocolate. We're going to temper the chocolate. We're going to kind of just fold them in. I'm not too worried about losing the volume because at this point we're just kind of tempering them in and cooling the chocolate a little bit so that it doesn't scramble the eggs. I have another question. How hot is the stove to melt the butter and sugar mix? The stove is off. Once it comes to a boil and you put the chocolate and butter in, turn the stove completely off. And then you can actually just set the pot back on the warm burner and let it do the rest of the work there. So now we're going to pour this into the rest of the egg. It smells amazing. Once we figure out how to invent smell-o-vision, I'm going to have 100,000 million viewers. So scrape it all in. Waste not, want not, right, Michelle? I don't know if she's watching or not. Everybody should go over, I believe, at 4 o'clock. My very good friend, Michelle Mitchell Pastry Designs, is doing a cooking class as well. You should go over and watch her as well. And now we're going to fold. So folding technique, I have another question. Does it matter what size eggs to use, large or extra large? It doesn't really matter what size eggs to use. I think these are large eggs. You don't want to use jumbo because that's going to throw the recipe off, but large or extra large is fine. So folding, essentially what we're doing is we're mixing in the ingredients gently so that you don't knock out that air. Kind of like if you were making a Genoise sponge cake, same kind of method. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the spatula, I'll show you on the overhead. We're going to be taking the spatula and we're scraping down, hitting the bottom of the bowl to make sure we don't miss any ingredients, and folding up and over. So I'm going to do it real slow. So scrape all the way down and up and over. You can see the chocolate comes up because we're pulling it up from the bottom. And you're just going to fold everything in. Occasionally you'll see me scrape the edge. If you kind of tilt the bowl, it'll work a little bit better. But you're just kind of gently trying to mix in all the ingredients so you don't knock out too much of the air. If you were to just beat it real hard, it's going to knock out all of that air that you worked so hard to get in there. And the cake isn't going to rise as well. So you can see that it's starting to all mix together. You got a nice dark color going on there. And that is pretty much as far as we want to take it. So long as there's no real, you can see it, it's kind of an even color. So long as there's no real bright white strands of white going through it or egg going through it, you're pretty good. It's pretty safe to go in. So now, essentially, we're going to pour it into the pan. It's going to fill the pan about half to 3/4 of the way. Do not worry because it's not going to rise that much that it's going to overflow onto the pan, out of the pan and into the oven. Make sure you get all that delicious batter in there. It smells like brownies. Just if you're not making this at home with me, just so you know exactly what it smells like. And that's it. Ready to go. It's going to bake in the oven. The oven is going to be at 325. It's going to bake for about 40 minutes. Now, like a cheesecake, this is going to bake in a water bath. What that does is that creates a gentle environment for the cake to bake in. So you won't get a crack on top. A lot of times if you see a cheesecake and it's got that really harsh crack, it looks like a Grand Canyon going through the middle of it. It's because the heat was too high. It might not have been baked with a water bath. The water bath just creates this nice, gentle, relaxing environment for the cake to bake in. Much like if you were to take a bath at home, you lay in the bath and it's nice and relaxing and gentle environment. Same thing is going on with the cake. It's going to have a glass of wine. It's going to relax in the pan as it's baking. Good thing to note, though, is when you use a water bath, it's best to start with hot water, because if you start with cold water, the water has to heat up before it's going to help create that warm environment in the pan for the cake. If you start with hot water, put it in a hot oven, everything's already hot, it's going to bake a lot faster. It's not going to have to wait all that time for the water around it to heat up. So that's pretty much it. Another good tip is that you want to pour the water in once it's in the oven. So essentially, I'm kind of doing this backwards. You want to set your pan in the oven, put your cake pan, the pan with the batter in the base pan, and then pour your hot water into it so that you're not carrying a pan of water and making sure it doesn't spill or splash or anything into the oven. Once it's in the oven, you pour it in and it's ready to go. Easy, ready to go. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to put our pan in the oven. Disregard the macaroons. You can pull the shelf out a little bit so it's easier to reach. And then we're going to take our hot water. And we're going to pour it in the side of the pan. And you want it to fill up about halfway of the insert pan. The pan that has the batter in it. You want to fill the water line up to about halfway that pan. There you go. Push it back into the oven, and you see we didn't splash any, we didn't make a mess. And that's going to bake for about 45 minutes, 40 to 45 minutes on 325, or until it just feels set in the, on top. The cake itself it'll bake, the eggs will bake, it'll set up, and then when you just very lightly touch the top, it won't jiggle, it'll feel a little set, and then it's ready to go, ready to pull out. So you do have to let it chill overnight before you take it out of the pan. I have one chilling. I'm going to show you how to take it out of the pan in just a minute. Before we do that, I'm going to get started on the chocolate ganache because we need to bring our heavy cream up to a boil for that. I'm just going to tidy up a little bit real quick. And so here, essentially chocolate ganache is, again, an emulsion. It's an emulsion of cream and chocolate. There's different types of ganache, different stages. There's a soft ganache, a medium ganache, and a firm ganache. Soft ganache is used pretty much for glazing cakes. Medium ganache can also be used for glazing cakes. Is also good for like filling a cake, using it as a filling, or like filling eclairs or something. Stiff ganache you use if you're going to make chocolate truffles. So we're going to be making a medium ganache, which is equal parts of chocolate and heavy cream weighed. You want to make sure you weigh your ingredients because they'll be equal that way. So we're going to go ahead and bring our cream just to barely a boil. Turn it on high. We're going to heat the cream. We're going to pour it over the chocolate. We're going to let it sit again for a couple minutes so that the chocolate has a chance to melt. And then we're going to whisk it and create that emulsion. And it's going to be a beautiful glaze that we're going to pour over the cake, which we're getting ready to pull out of the pan right now. So if you have downloaded and read the recipe, you read that the way that I remove the cake is I actually put the pan with the cold cake right on the stovetop, and that's going to melt the butter on the bottom of the pan, and the cake is going to release really easily. I saw that one pop up. Can ganache be any flavor? Can you make white chocolate ganache? Yes, you can make white chocolate ganache. You can make milk chocolate ganache. You can make dark chocolate ganache. You can make unsweetened ganache. If you want to flavor a ganache, you can do a couple different methods. You can use extracts, which are really good, water-based or alcohol-based extracts. You can use alcohol. You can use like an amaretto is really good. Chambord is a good raspberry flavor to add to it. You can also use oils. You can use like flavoring oils, like peppermint oil works really well. Or fruit purees can actually also be added to a ganache as well. I can look it up. I don't remember offhand what the exact ratios are. Fruit purees are a little bit different because it adds a little bit more moisture to the ganache, so you have to reduce the amount of cream that you use. If anybody's interested, let me know and I can look it up for you. So I'm gonna go ahead. So we're gonna take the cake out of the pan. We're gonna heat it up on the stovetop really quick. Just sit it on there for a couple seconds. It's going to melt soften the butter. The cake is going to fall right out of the pan. Guarantee it. This is also how I unmold cheesecakes. I never use a springform pan. Even though a recipe says for a cheesecake to use a springform pan, I never use a springform pan. I use a cake pan. So I usually use between a 8 or a 10-inch cake pan for my cheesecakes. And I never have an issue. I'll show you the method I use. So we're going to pull the pre-baked cake out. This is what it looks like when it's done. It will feel set in the oven, and then you want it to chill overnight before you take it out of the pan, just to let the cake harden up so that when it comes out of the pan, it won't completely break up and fall apart. So our cream actually has just come to a boil. This is all working out perfect timing. Cream come to a boil. Don't stop watching the cream. If you walk away when you put cream on the stove, it's going to boil over and it's going to make a mess. Smells really bad, makes a big mess. We're going to pour the hot cream over the chocolate. And that's it. We're just going to let that sit for a minute. Excuse me. While our stove is still on and a little bit warm, believe it or not, we're going to put the cake pan right there on the stove. It's just going to take a couple seconds. You want to have your plate ready that you're going to turn it out onto. You can give it a little turn. Just be careful, don't burn yourself. And that's done. You can hear it start sizzling a little bit. I don't know if you heard it or not. Be very careful because the cake pan is going to get a little bit warm. That's ready to go. It's ready to turn out. So you're going to take your plate, put it on top, hold your breath, turn it over, and give it a little tap with the back of a knife. And you'll hear the cake release and lift it off, and it did not release, which is fine. If it doesn't release, give it a little shake, and that did it. And there you have it. See, it comes right out of the pan, cleanly. We're going to pull our paper off. That was our little insurance policy, and there you go. That is an amazing flourless chocolate cake. Really adorable. Another thing that we're going to do, actually I'm going to whisk up the ganache real quick. So the chocolate has had a few minutes to melt and get soft. We're going to start in the middle using a whisk. We're going to start in the middle and just give little, can they see well? Yeah, they can see well. Just give little mixing motions until you start to see it come together just like that in the center, and then you can start going a little bit heavier and bringing it in. You want to start the emulsion in the center of the mix and then mix it around, and look at that. That is amazing chocolate ganache. So it is still warm. If you were to put it in the fridge, it would set up and get really hard, which is fine. If you make too much. Oh, we have a question.
No.
Grandmaster. Is that what you're saying? Okay, Josh, thank you very much. Grandmaster, whatever that means. If you make too much ganache, put it in an airtight container, throw it in the fridge. It's going to set up. If you want to reheat it and melt it back down, pop it in your microwave for about 30-second intervals until it gets to the consistency that you want. Don't overheat it because then it will break and it looks like this gross mess. The oil and the fats and the solids will separate. So just to take this cake over the top, in the recipe it says to use strawberry jam. I'm using raspberry jam. If you watched me last week, we used seeded raspberry jam for our rugelach. I have some left over, so we're just going to use that. Excuse me. We're going to take probably about a tablespoon, maybe a tablespoon and a half. Oh, we have another question. Yummy. Of course it's yummy.
Could I use part of whipping cream to make it hard?
Yes. So if you wanted to do a non-dairy version, obviously I said use the margarine instead of the butter. In place of the heavy cream in the ganache, use Rich Whip. Rich's makes a whipped topping. Use that to make your ganache. You can heat it up the same, pour it right over the chocolate. Same measurements. Everything is the same in place of your heavy cream. Don't use like a non-dairy creamer for coffee because that has too much water in it. The Rich Whip is more of a thick consistency. So we're going to put a little bit on top of the cake. A little bit more. And then we're going to spread it. We're just going to coat the top of the cake with the raspberry jam. A nice even layer. I'm using a little mini offset spatula. If you don't have this, you can use the back of a spoon just to smooth it out a little bit. We're going to use this again when we put the ganache on. And then we're going to take our ganache. We're going to put the ganache right on top of that. Oh, this is a beautiful thing. And we're going to want the ganache to drip down the sides of the cake. Actually, bear with me one sec. I'm going to pull my cake turntable down. We're getting fancy now. Can they see this? Okay. That's going to make it easier. If you have a turntable, God bless you, pull it out and use it. If you don't, not a big deal. So we're going to go ahead and smooth the ganache out on top. Just let it get to the very edge. If it goes over the edge, wonderful. And then do a little bit more of a smooth. And that's going to push it out to the edge. And we're not trying to coat the edge. We're just trying to get a drip down the side of it. You can give it a little tap to encourage it. But I like to drip. It makes it look a little bit more rustic. And then on top, you can do a little swirl design. And then garnish it with a couple fresh raspberries. And there you have it. A Passover-friendly, flourless chocolate cake. A little bit of raspberry jam on top. Coated in chocolate ganache. And it is beautiful. So you can see the nice swirl on the top there. I don't know if they can see. Can you see the drip on the edge? You can see a little bit of the drip on the edge. Oh, we'll go to this camera. And you can see the drip around the edge. And this is going to be a crowd pleaser. All right. So that was fun. So now we're going to move on to our second recipe. Because I promised you 2 recipes today. 2 very simple recipes. How easy was that recipe? That was amazingly easy. Super quick. Let it chill overnight. You're good to go. Golden. The ganache can be made ahead of time and kept in the fridge. All right. So, for the macaroons, I'll put this up here. We're going to get our pan prepped first. We're going to use parchment paper again. Get our pan prepped. Sorry, I ran away. I have all my ingredients ready here. Just wanted to go grab them. Have a question? Comment? Concern? Move over?
I need a cake she needs your cake in her life. Tell her
Olivia, I need your cake in my life. All right, well, come on and get it. I am right. Sorry, my producer is egging me on here, and I'm just not picking it up. Orders. I am taking orders. You can order. Shoot me an email. BryanBakery@gmail.com.
Bryan.bakery.
BRYAN.bakery BAKERY @gmail.com. Or message me on Facebook. I do take orders. I do ship. I don't know if this cake will ship. We can try it and see what happens. cookies, brownies, arugula, that sort of thing. We're working on getting an online store out as well, but I'm more than happy to take online orders. I do. You can pick up. I can do delivery for a small fee, but yeah, we can do that. So I can get my cake in your life. Take your sugar. We're on to the macaroon recipe. Sorry, keeping everybody on your toes. We're gonna take our sugar, put that in the bowl. Take our eggs, put egg whites. So last week we reviewed how to separate eggs. So this is your two or three egg whites. Put those in the bowl. Put the vanilla extract in the bowl. Oh my God, we're up to 31 viewers. I'm famous, Ma. We're gonna whisk it together. I'm deviating a little bit from the recipe, but it's okay. If you follow the recipe, they'll come out perfect. If you follow the way I'm doing it, I think Katie and Jeff are baking along with us. Either way is fine. Follow the recipe, don't follow what I'm doing. They both come out fine. We're going to whisk it up, and we just want to whisk it to froth up the egg whites a little bit and get all the sugar dissolved in there with the vanilla. It's not going to take much to whip up these egg whites. You can see it's getting a little bit lighter in color already. And that's it. These are ready to go. And then this is our coconut. This is the desiccated coconut, 6 ounces of that. We're going to pour that right in. This is where it gets a little messy. Katie, I recommend letting Jeff do this part. You're going to take your hands, clean hands, wash your hands, always wash your hands, and mix by hand. My mother hates it when I do this, but c'est la vie. We're going to mix it up, get it all nice and coated. You're essentially, you're wanting to coat all of the coconut in the egg white and sugar mixture. You can give it a little squeeze as you're mixing it as well. And that's it. We're going to let this sit as I clean my hands off for just a couple of minutes to kind of let the coconut hydrate a little bit. So because it's desiccated or dried coconut, it's going to stick together a little bit easier if we let it sit for a minute and let it hydrate. I'm going to rinse my hands off. I hope you're pouring the ganache on these macaroons. You're a step ahead of me. Just be patient. I'm getting there. Got our pan ready. These macaroons can be made ahead of time. Store them in a Ziploc bag, airtight container for up to a week, and they are delicious and great. You can take a spoon. You can take this thing if you have one, an ice cream scooper. You can use like a tablespoon measure, however you want to do it. You don't even have to use a spoon or measuring thing to drop them onto the pan. So one way you can do it is kind of make like a little haystack. That can be nice and it doesn't have to be tight. It can be loose. Just stick it together like that. It's going to be a nice little haystack shape. What I do is I put some in a ice cream scoop and then pack it in nice and tight. And this is going to create a really nice little dome shape. You're just pressing it in there, and then it makes a nice little dome shape. You can use a spoon if you want to. If you don't have an ice cream scoop and you want to make that cute little shape, you can use a spoon. Same thing. Pack it in, and then pull it out, and you get a nice shape there with it. You can use a tablespoon measure. I think the recipe says to use a tablespoon. And I think the recipe actually says use a tablespoon to make little haystack shapes. But I'm just showing you different ways that you can do it. Any way works, whatever works the best for you. Clearly that's not working very well. Whatever works best for you. I happen to have ice cream scoops. Doesn't really matter what size you use either. It depends on just how many you want to have left over or how many you want to make. This recipe, if you're using this yellow scoop, it is a number 20 scoop. Don't ask me how many ounces it is because I do not know how many ounces this scoop is. This makes 10 if you use the scoop. It makes 10 macaroons. Rinse my hands off real quick. Set your oven to 350 degrees. These are going to bake for about 20 minutes. They're going to get golden brown. You can bake them a little longer if you want it to be a little bit more toasted. You can bake it a little less time if you want them to be less toasted. But you want to do a minimum of 15 minutes just to make sure that the egg whites cook all the way through and set and the sugar dissolves in the heat. So I'm going to throw these in the oven with our cake. You don't want to bake them at the same time though. And with the magic of television, oh my god! They're done. This is what the finished product is going to look like. They are going to bubble and foam a little bit. You'll notice as they're baking, it's going to bubble up and foam and caramelize and kind of run out a little bit. That is totally fine. It's just the sugar is actually melting and liquefying and coming out and making a little puddle. It's a beautiful thing. It's a nice caramelized flavor. It's something really nice to add to it. You're going to let them cool for about 20 minutes on the sheet pan, and then they will come off super easy. You can see they don't stick, they don't make a mess, they just come off real easy. Now, back to what my mother was saying, is if you have a little bit of extra ganache, which we do, we have a lot extra, something really nice you can do is take a Ziploc bag, and we're going to put some of the ganache in a Ziploc bag, spoon it in, spoon your way to health, because this is very healthy. There are no calories in any of the desserts that I make. So you can tell all your friends that. If you use my recipes, there are no calories whatsoever. You're going to zip up the bag, push out as much air as you can, and then take a pair of scissors, and we're going to cut the corner of the bag. We're making a little pastry bag. I'm going to show them on the above camera. You're going to cut a very, very, very small corner off of the bag. Squeeze a little bit into the bowl first so you can see how fast it's coming out. And then 1, 2, 3. We're going to drizzle it on the macaroons. And then you're going to put this into the fridge or the freezer and let it set up. The ganache is going to get nice and hard and set. And then you have a nice chocolate dipped macaroon or chocolate drizzled macaroon. You can dip them as well, actually. I'll show you one of those as too. Keep the ganache in the bowl. Take the macaroon. I'll do it over here. Take the macaroon and you can just dip the top in, shake it off a little bit. You can do it like that. You can take the macaroon, dip the side in, and do it like that. Or you can just leave them plain. Alright, so we're going to plate them up because they look beautiful. Show all the different ways you can do it. Which one? This one. There you go. How easy was that? How beautiful are those? Save this ganache. Don't throw it away. It's a beautiful thing. It comes in really handy. If you make pancakes, heat some up and drizzle it over your pancakes. If you have some matzah laying around, pour it over your matzah. It makes matzah a lot more delicious, I promise. And with that, I think we are done. We have our macaroons, some chocolate dipped, some chocolate drizzled. We have our flourless chocolate cake. And that's it. I'm going to taste a macaroon just to show you that they are amazing. Look at that. Beautiful. A nice crunchy shell. Amazing. So simple, so delicious. And then you have the flourless chocolate excess cake. I'm not going to cut into that and take a bite of that. I want to thank you all for coming into my kitchen and baking along with me. Excuse me. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I know I enjoyed baking with you and doing the show with you. Recipes are available on the website, on my Facebook page, Bryan's Bakery. Recipe for the macaroons, recipe for the ganache, recipe for the flourless chocolate cake are all there. So go ahead and head over there if you want to grab those. Tuesday we will be doing another live, Facebook Live, through the Chizuk Emunah congregation website. I will be making Passover mandel bread, which is kind of like a biscotti. Really delicious recipe. Can be used again all year round, but it is specifically a Passover recipe. So tune in on Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock for that, this Tuesday. I will be back with Baking with Bryan live next Sunday. I hope you will join us then. As a reminder, if you feel like you want to contribute or you want to express your support or gratitude for me for doing this, I do have a GoFundMe page. The link is available on my Bryan's Bakery page as well. Any and all donations that are made there will go directly back into ingredients, equipment, stuff to do the show. As always, the show will remain free for everybody to watch and enjoy. But if you do feel like you want to contribute, I greatly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. You can go ahead and contribute at the GoFundMe page. With that, I'm going to sign off in the immortal words of the original TV chef, Bon appetit.